Okay, let's make a start. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Stephen Haben, a consultant at the Energy Systems Catapult, and I just want to welcome everyone again to another Value in Energy Data seminar. So a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So we're going to be recording this as usual, and we'll be putting this on our YouTube channel shortly after the event. But if everyone could just sort of keep their cameras off and mute their microphones throughout the presentation, that way we can focus on Tao's presentation and only the speaker. And for questions, we're going to leave questions till the end as usual. But if we could, we'll come to those at the end. So yeah, could everyone turn off their cameras before we kick off? Brilliant, thank you. All right, so yeah, I'm going to make a quick introduction of Dr. Tao Hong. So I'm very pleased to have this talk today. It's on a topic which is very close to our heart here at the Energy Systems Catapult. So a little introduction. Tao has a lot of different positions and qualifications for this, so we're really excited to have him here today. So I'll read a few of those things out. So Dr. Tao Hong is the Duke Energy Distinguished Professor. He's also the Graduate Director and Research Director of the Systems Engineering and Engineering Management Department. And he's also the Director of the Big Data Energy Analytics Laboratory, and also the NCEMC Faculty Fellow of Energy Analytics. He's also Director at Large at the International Institute of Forecasters. He's the General Chair of the Global Energy Forecasting Competition. And he's also the founding and past chair of both the IEEE Working Group on Energy Forecasting and the International Institute of Forecasters section on water, energy, and environment. And Dr. Hong received his PhD with co-majors in operations research and electrical engineering from North Carolina State University. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Tao Hong, who's going to talk about data, crowdsourcing, and groundbreaking discoveries. So yeah, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Haben, for the nice introduction. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Let me first share my screen. So should I turn off my camera as well?
You're welcome to keep your camera on. So, you know,
okay.
Most people do, but it's up to you, really.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it. Thanks.
All right, cool. Yeah. Oh, all right. Again, thanks everyone for coming. So today I'm going to talk about this data crowdsourcing and groundbreaking discoveries. These are really some lessons learned from energy forecasting competitions, though I will be briefly talk about some other competitions as well. Primarily, we're focusing on the recent decades. Okay. So first of all, I know that this webinar series is about data. So I want to show you a survey. So this survey was done in 2017. So that's 5 years ago. So at that time, data analytics was just getting into the power utility industry, for a few years, and people were really, looking into what can we do with data analytics, basically what can we do with data. And then there was a survey. This survey was sent out to hundreds of power companies and executives and managers. And then there were many questions in the survey, but I try to highlight two of them. So the first one is to ask them, what are your high priority applications? So when we talk about data analytics, what are your high priority applications? And then the other question on this table is about the highest priority applications. So basically among the high priority ones, what's the most important one? Okay, so you see the bar, we are listing these respondents from the highest percentage to the lowest one. And then these two, in terms of high priority versus highest priority, they are highly correlated. Pretty much the ranking is on the left. The very top one is energy forecasting. Okay, so 5 years ago, when we talk about analytics in the utility industry, more than half of them were really about energy forecasting, and 20% of them rated energy forecasting as the highest priority application. And then if you look at, going down the list, we have smart meter analytics. Of course, this also includes some of forecasting and data analytics just at a smart meter level, right? And then grid operations, actually a lot of forecasting in grid operations as well. So energy trading is the same. So forecasting is not only rated number one on this list, is also kind of tied to many other applications as well. So the big takeaway from this survey is that people care about energy forecasting. So even though data analytics was kind of new to the utility industry, but energy forecasting is sort of a core application of that big data data analytics umbrella. Okay. So that was energy forecasting in industry. So basically that said, industry need energy forecasting, and then they recognize they need it. Okay. So I'm showing you another plot. So this was from a review paper we recently published. I think it published 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. So we look at the journal publications during the last decade. So from 2010 to 2019. Okay. And then we break them down by load forecasting, price forecasting, wind power forecasting, and solar power forecasting. Okay, and you see these 4 different colors in these bars. The bottom one is the bottom bar is 2010, and then going up is 2019. And you can see the sudden, the pretty almost exponential growth of academic publications. So if you just look at, for example, load forecasting, the brownish orange bar, from say in 2019, we are looking at close to 1,000 papers published in load forecasting, and this was from Scopus. Okay, you can also see wind power forecasting started from maybe around 100 in 2010, went up to more than 500 or 600 in 2019. So there are some areas that are definitely growing, like solar forecasting grow even more. So in 2010, you see maybe less than 50 papers, and then going to 2019 is close to 500. So different areas, different subdomains of energy forecasting has been growing, or they're all growing, but at different pace. At this stage, we see still load forecasting is the main area, the primary, the biggest sub area, but wind is probably the second, and then solar is the third, and price is the next one, right? So this is energy forecasting in academia. Very busy. So takeaway here is very busy. Many papers are being published. See energy forecasting in total about 2,000 papers in this field. Here we're not even counting some smaller domain like outage. People forecasting outages. Some other smaller sub areas of energy forecasting that are not really included here. So very busy area. But then we have a few genuine. Well, here's another one. So we know today AI is a hot buzzword. Okay, AI and machine learning, but it's really not new to energy forecasting folks. It's actually not new to utility people. If you look at journal articles, again in the academic world, from 1990s all the way till today, you can see these sharp changes, exponential growth in the recent, say, 20 years. But they actually started around 1990. So it's been there for a while, and there were, hops, like there were peaks. In around mid 1990, there was a jump, and then around mid 2000, there was a jump, and then starting from around 2009, 2010 is keep growing, right? So these are sort of the historical trend. You can see, how busy the area is and how much work there are in this domain. And arguably, I can still argue that the load forecasting is probably the most successful application of AI in the energy field, in energy utility space. Okay, so there's some well-known commercial products there, and power companies are using it in production environments. In many other applications, AI applications for power systems, it's still at theoretical level or just in the lab. But say load forecasting is in production environment for more than 20 years. Okay. Then I want to raise some genuine questions. So I want to frame this this presentation with questions, with my experience, and I hope to spark some discussions at the end, right? So I have some genuine questions. So to both sides, just a bit background about myself. So I was in the industry while I was getting my PhD, while I was working in the industry, and then a few years after my PhD, I went back to academia. So I kind of know both sides. Even after I become a professor, I still do consulting work and help clients do some practical work. So got some genuine questions to both sides. So to academia, do we really know what is the state of art? So if we go back to these papers, right, to these papers, do we really know which of these papers really represent the state of art? And if you ask this question to people in this field, I guess at least half of them probably don't know because there are just too many papers out there. Every year, 2,000 papers. I don't know how many people can catch up with those papers, right? Another question is, how many of these papers are useful? So useful means maybe the work is being used by the company. So basically, the code is implemented somewhere, and then the companies, the industry is using them, or maybe there's some insights gathered from these papers. Some insights proposed or discovered by these papers, they are used as guidance to practitioners. Okay, so those means useful. I mean, there are other definitions of usefulness, right? You can say, oh, these papers help my student graduates. Well, that's useful too, but it's not really like that's not archival value, right? So some schools has set bars. You have to publish 3 papers or 2 papers to graduate. Well, it's useful for that moment, but what do they do to the knowledge of humanity? So I don't consider that's really useful in our sense, right? And then let's say if the paper, majority of the papers are not useful, okay, and that's fact. The majority of these papers are not useful. So can we reproduce those results? Okay, can we reproduce those results? Again, there says load. So for example, this is AI for load forecasting. In 2021, we're looking at hundreds of papers in load forecasting that apply artificial intelligence or machine learning techniques. If you look at this, in 2019, we have about 2,000 papers in the energy forecasting domain. How many of those papers are reproducible? Some of you, if you work in the industry, you might, you see some problems you try to solve. Maybe you go back to the academic literature and try to find works. And I bet if you have gone through that, you must have experienced a lot of frustrations because most of the paper you find out, they are not reproducible. And I can tell you, I've been teaching a course called Energy Analytics and another course, forecasting methodologies, techniques, and practice. So these 2 courses, in both courses, I require students to reproduce some papers from the academic literature, but I do not tell them which papers to reproduce. So at the beginning, I want them to do literature review. So they need to review hundreds of papers in a subdomain, so like subdomain. Say, for example, if they're doing load forecasting, they don't review paper just, say a broad review of load forecasting. They need to find, say, short-term load forecasting with certain techniques. So they carve out the area and find a few years of paper to review. And then they need to find, among those papers they look into, they need to reproduce them. And I can tell you, every year, majority of the class cannot find papers that are reproducible because maybe in those years the papers in their subdomain they try to look into, they're just not reproducible, and there are many reasons for the reproducibility, okay, that they cannot reproduce them. So we'll discuss that later on. So these are just, I'm trying to pose some genuine questions and sort of give you my take on these questions. And then on the industry side, so question is, what are your business needs, right? So if industry, I often ask my clients, so what do you really need, okay? There are things, the difference between wants and needs, right? So they may want, glory things, but what they really need may be just a fraction of what they want. So what are the business needs? Do you need a more accurate forecast, or do you need a more defensible forecast? Do you need a better communication of these, forecasting models? Do you need to help your stakeholder to understand what's going on with your models? All these things, they're specific need we have to address. And then the other question is, are you getting what you need from academia? Right. So again, if your industry people ask you this question, are you getting what you need from academia? So maybe you need students. Okay, you say, oh, I have workforce crisis. I have problem feeding my pipeline. So I have people come and go. So I need to hire. So are you getting the good new hires from academia? Or you may say, okay, I have this problem, nobody have solved before, and I need to solve this problem. Then you need some research from professors. Are you getting those research done, and the outcome of those research work satisfying, right? So are you getting what you need from academia? And then the next question is, did you provide academia what they need to be successful? So for example, if you say, oh, I need students, I need high quality viable candidates for my job, then did you provide academia what they need to produce those students? Okay, so some companies say, oh, I don't really care, you do whatever, university programs, you generate, you do whatever you do, and then we'll just look at your student. But there's a big gap between the academia and industry. So if you don't tell them what you need, and if you don't help them develop those students, most likely the product from those programs are not what you want, and not what you need either. So we really need some collaborations here. So I'm just posting some of these questions here. This is for discussion. All right. I think I will share with you my personal experience. So I worked on my dissertation from 2009 to 2010. It actually took me only 2 years to finish my dissertation and graduate. And I submitted 2 manuscripts on load forecasting to journals, top journals at the time. Both of them were from the core findings or outcomes of my doctoral dissertation. And 2 papers, each one of them were reviewed by 5 reviewers. In total, my papers were rejected by 10 reviewers. Okay, so for those of you who know me now, you might be surprised because I rarely get rejections nowadays. I still get rejections, but very rare. But at that time, 10, 12 years ago, both of my papers were rejected, and I consider those were the top quality work, because before I graduated, the work already generated millions of dollars of revenue to the company I work for, and the work was at the time state of practice, state of art, because I was doing short-term load forecasting, and then through some pilots, private run pilot. My forecasts were way more accurate than my competitors. So that's why it generates revenues. Okay, so the industry sees the value of the work. That's why they pay for it. Okay, but that same work were rejected by academic papers. And look at the reasons, right? So one of them, some reviewers say, oh, your MAPE is too high. Okay, your MAPE stands for mean absolute percentage error. So that's the error measure to see how good your forecast is. And some reviewers say your MAPE is too high. Again, the things like if you look at a forecast from a data you haven't seen before, you can't judge the book by the cover. Okay, so some area you may see like a 3% MAPE, 4% MAPE, and some area you may see 5-6% MAPE, and some you may see 10% MAPE. Okay, so if you haven't done this, then just say, oh, the other papers are showing 1% MAPE, and yours you have 5%. That's too high. It's not fair. Okay, and then some said regression is too old. Regression is too old, and some said, why don't you use artificial intelligence? And there's another reviewer which is very interesting. So in the comments, like almost every other line, you see the word garbage. Oh, this is garbage. That's garbage. This is garbage. I mean, that's very disrespectful, and that's bully. So and many other nonsense comments. So rejected by 10 reviewers. Unfortunately, I was able to graduate because my advisors and committee members, they were all top-notch researchers in the field. So all these, fellows, HOE fellows, IEEE fellows, American Statistical Association fellows, all these well-known professors, they don't really need my papers for their promotion or next job. So, and they appreciate the quality of my work, and they let me graduate. Okay. And then 5 years later, okay. So, by the way, on the left-hand side, this was a rejection letter from one of those rejected papers. So you see, the title is Multiple Linear Regression-Based Short-Term Load Forecasting. That's pretty much the core of my doctoral dissertation. And 5 years later, I did a count. So actually, tomorrow is September 10th here, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. That's 12 years after graduation. So, but anyway, so 5 years after my graduation, I took a look at my dissertation. I look at, I had 0 journal publications when I graduated. So I want to see where's my dissertation, how many papers it generated. So it turned out that at the time, that dissertation had basically different sections and things, piecemeal. In total, generated 10 journal papers. So that's 5 years after graduation. And the dissertation itself at that time was cited 41 times, according to Google Scholar. As of today, it's more than 300 citations on the dissertation itself, and there are many, other papers and work being generated. So even today, I can still go back to my dissertation and pick a small thing from there and then wrote a paper out of it. So you can imagine. So at that time in 2010, it leads the field by about 5 to 10 years. So no exaggeration at that time. So in 2010, when I defend my thesis, the work led the field by about 5 to 10 years. So even after a year later, I was working at a software company called SAS. We started to commercialize the work from my dissertation. I told the SAS sales force, so I was directing a sales team at the time. So I told the sales force, so this work lead the field by at least 5 years. So you should be very confident to go on sale. And it turned out that the commercial version of my dissertation, which is a software package, that was sold by millions of dollars during those years, and it's still being sold. Every year nowadays it generates millions of dollars nowadays, because there's power companies are buying that, and they are using my work to run them in production environments and use them to forecast electricity. Okay, so this is just 5 years. Just if you look at a rejected work versus 5 years later. Just as a side note, so I know some of you are students or junior faculty members, so you got to have some thick skin, right? So your work get rejected, it may or may not mean that the work is bad. Okay, look at the review comments. I didn't show the reviewers' comments, so this is the editor's comment. It pretty much said it's bad. So, but later on, time tells. Time tells the how good the work was. So, so don't be frustrated and don't feel discouraged. Just keep doing the good work. Eventually, it will be recognized. Okay. So then, what went wrong? I would say, at the time, when I read the literature, I felt like most of the papers out there are really bad. I mean, I did recognize some really good papers. It turned out that I get in contact with some of those authors who wrote those excellent papers, and we actually had some collaborations later on. But on my end, I felt like my work was really top quality, but it got rejected just outright. So what went wrong? This is what happened. So this is if you look at 2010 and before, there were no benchmark data. So if you look at these papers, they don't use any benchmark data, and there were no benchmark models. So they don't benchmark a newly proposed work with any existing work that's any benchmarks. And then nobody can reproduce others' work. So if you look at the comments from the editor, okay, I think one of them said I didn't compare. Okay, so say, and the author should look into more recent publications dealing with the same problem and the state of art forecasting. So basically said, I didn't look into the state of art, and I didn't compare. So see, the paper fails to provide good test results for the forecast model, and there are no comparison studies. Basically said, I didn't compare with other people's work, but at the time, I tried hard, but I can't reproduce anybody's work. So the work was not reproducible. One of the reasons is that I think the root cause was that there were no benchmark data. If there were no data, how can I reproduce it? Okay. And then at that time, nobody knew who was better or worse, and nobody had a solution to this problem. So the work was not reproducible. We don't know who's better. And you will see all these papers coming up. They are basically looking at another paper's MAPE. Say, hey, the other paper had MAPE of 3, and then my MAPE is 2%. Then mine is better. But that's on different data set and different jurisdictions and different areas, all different. So how can you compare MAPE out there, outright like that? So that's the problem. So I think, again, the root cause is that there were really no benchmark data. And Again, if the data is not there, you can't compare. You can make apple-to-apple comparison. Okay. So I thought about it, and I proposed a solution, and I implement the solution. So I think we should run forecasting competitions at that time. So then I started a competition series called a Global Energy Forecasting Competition. It started in 2012. For the first competition, I didn't consider, oh, we may run this going forward. Maybe we just do one competition at that time. I just thought we should just do a competition. But it turned out like later on we had two later competitions, and then it's a series of competitions. We'll run more going forward. So the last one, 2017, will not be the last global energy forecasting competition, I promise. Okay. But anyway, so my solution is to run forecasting competitions. And there were some rationales behind it. Okay, so the idea of these competitions is to post a data set that people can work on. Of course, all the contestants need to work on the same data set. And then they can use any method they want. And we'll compare, we'll see who got better forecast. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's go back here. No benchmark data before 2010. If I run a competition, I provide the data, then that data can be used for benchmark. Then we'll be benchmarking all the contestants. And the idea was that to release this data after the competition so that future researchers can also compare their results with the winners of the previous competitions, right? And then no benchmark models. So at the time, there were no benchmark models, and I proposed a benchmark model. And it turned out that benchmark model was fairly easy to reproduce. And people have been using that benchmark model. Many hundreds of people have been using that benchmark model going forward. Okay. And then from there, we can see, okay, we can tell what is the state of art. Again, back to earlier questions I asked, do we know what is state of art? Do we know how accurate a forecast is supposed to be at this stage? And then through this competition, we can tell, okay, this is the state of art, and this is the percentage, and this is the top methodology, winning methodologies in these competitions. So those are the things we expect to see. And that exactly happened through the competition. So these competitions attracted thousands of people. They were building models. They were submitting their forecast. They were competing with each other. And then for every competition, we recognize some winners. Okay, we recognize some winners. And we invite them to write papers. We archive those methodologies through journal publications, and those papers were all highly cited going forward. So you will see some papers are highly cited because it's just people just want to put a word, put a sentence there. But a lot of these papers from the competitions, they spark new ideas. There were new ideas built on these competition papers, and then you can see the continuation of research. You can see people, researchers around the globe trying to push the envelope, right? So I want to acknowledge a few earlier competitions because my, the one I did with my collaborators, those were not the first forecasting competitions. So in fact, if you look into the forecasting competitions, you can trace back to late 1970s. Okay, in the very early days, people were trying to compare methodologies. They try to see, which method is better. And then around late 1970s to early 1980s, so there were competitions that invites multiple contestants to join the competition and then build forecast models. At that time, it was mainly for time series forecasting. So there was a series of competition called M competitions. I think now it's M5 or M6. So I don't recall the numbers. I stopped tracking the numbers. But that's a professor from Greece, one of the founders of International Institute of Forecasters, and also one of the founders of the journal, the top journal in forecasting, which is International Journal of Forecasting. So the guy that made a huge contribution to the field of forecasting. But those competitions are very, sort of lay the ground of later competitions. So one of the outcome or the key takeaway from those competitions, especially the earlier ones, is that forecasting is not just an application of time series analysis. So this is a quote from Professor Rob Hindman from Monash University in Australia. So he used to be the editor-in-chief for International Journal of Forecasting. This quote was from his paper when he looked at the history of forecasting competitions. Okay, so those are general forecasting competitions, not necessarily focusing on energy or load or wind. Okay, so in early 1990s, there was a Puget Sound shootout. So Puget Sound, I think Puget Sound Power and Light invited some folks, researchers, to build short-term load forecasting models. And one of them, actually, the best performing model, were later, the team later wrote a paper, short-run forecasts of electricity load and peaks. Okay, the paper was published in 1997, about 5 years after the competition or the shootout. The nice thing about that competition is that it actually sort of incubates a commercial software later on, so called PRT, pattern recognition technologies. So the professor who had very good performance over there was a professor in SMU, South Methodist University. And then later on, that piece of work turned to EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, and become NCEMC, artificial neural nets for short-term load forecasting. And then later on, the professor ran on his own to build a company around it. So nowadays, hundreds of companies are using that tool. So it's a AI neural nets-based load forecasting engine. Okay. And then in 2001, there was a EU-NITE competition. So that's from Europe. It's a medium-term load forecasting competition. I think it was forecasting daily peaks of electricity for a month ahead. Again, fairly successful competition. The winners published their papers on journals as well, on a journal as well. Okay, so these were earlier competitions before the global energy forecasting competition that I led. So then let's get into this energy for the recent decade. So we had three competitions. It's a series of competitions. In 2012, regression. I'm just summarizing some of the outcomes or findings from this series of competitions, and there are more. If you're interested, you can look into the publications. They were all published by International Journal of Forecasting, and I want to just briefly talk about some of these, because early on I said, I talked about regression, and then at that time, the reviewer felt, oh, regression is too old. You should use AI, blah, blah, blah. So let's see what's going on from the competition. So in 2012, regression was used by all top 5 teams. Okay, all top 5 teams use regression. And among any of the top 7 teams, none of them use neural nets. Okay, none of them use neural nets. Again, if you flash back to 10 years ago, so at that time, neural nets was very popular in the load forecasting literature. So most papers, when they publish, they have some neural nets flavor in it. They either propose neural net models or propose some hybrid models with neural nets, or use neural nets for comparison purposes and so forth. Okay, neural nets were not used by any of the top 7 teams. In 2014, regression was used again by all top 5 teams, and neural nets was marginally used by a number 3 team. Okay, actually that number 3 team was my student, so it was a single person team, also the highest ranked single person team, and she used neural nets. Actually that neural nets used or not, it doesn't affect the forecast performance. She used it only because she had a forecast engine previously built, and that engine, there was neural nets part of it for computation or error processing. So again, for that competition, use neural nets or not doesn't change her results or ranking. Okay, and then in 2017, we find that no one technique or methodology dominate the others. So there was no dominant techniques, and all top 5 teams in the qualifying match use forecast combination. So forecast combination has been well known as a best practice in forecasting. So in short, it's about combining different forecasts. So you can generate different forecasts from the same technique, or you can generate different forecasts from different techniques. But if you combine them, typically the combination gave you a more robust forecast and more accurate forecast. Okay, so that's like a best practice in forecasting. So we find that all top 5 teams in that forecasting competition in 2017's global energy forecasting competition, they use forecast combination. Okay, so these are some of the findings from the global energy forecasting competitions. Okay, and of course some of these controversial. Like for example, regression was very effective. People didn't know that at the time, and some of these findings are sort of confirming the best practice. For example, using forecast combination, right? And the other one was no techniques dominate the others. That's like there's a no free lunch theorem in machine learning. Basically said there's nothing is better. There's no one technique is better than the others. No one method is better than the others, right? So that these confirm some of the well-known practices or well-known things people already know. Okay, but we just confirm them in the energy forecasting domain. And then I want to talk about crowdsourcing. So from these forecasting competitions, it's actually it may be surprising to people that a lot of winners were not traditional power engineers. And if you look at the literature, the academic literature, majority of the papers, I would say maybe more than 90% of those energy forecasting papers were produced by power engineers. Okay, and that's understandable because that's a problem generated or originated from the power energy field. The system planners and system operators, they work on them and they write papers out, for their work. But if you look at the forecasting competitions, winners of these competitions, a lot of winners were not power engineers. And that's the nice thing about these competitions. Let me trace back to here. We attract people from all around the world. And here's just a sort of a heat map showing you where the people are from, the contestants, where the contestants were from. We attract people, thousands of contestants from different business sectors around the world to join these competitions. And then they help bring in new ideas. They help sort of advance the field. And if you look at the winners, their affiliation or their professional practice field, some of them are economists, some of them are specialized in neural nets, some of them are optimization people, okay, computational optimization. Some of them are computer scientists, and some of them are meteorologists. Okay, I just name a few. So, for example, you may recognize some of these names. Okay, you may recognize some of these names. So this was sort of the best performing team in the Puget Sound shootout. Okay, two of them later. Well, all of them are economists. You see, they're other than the last one, work at Puget Sound. Okay. The first four, they were all economists. So Department of Economics. I think this author used to work at UC San Diego. Okay, and then two of them later on won Nobel Prize. Okay, Ingo and Granger. So they won Nobel Prize. That said, they had nothing to do with electricity. They had nothing to do with power systems. But they basically pretty much brought their econometrics models to solve load forecasting problems. Okay. Another thing, earlier on I mentioned PRT, pattern recognition technologies. That's a software also from the Puget Sound shootout. So actually, the founder of that company was a professor, but that professor had nothing to do with power system. It's an electrical engineering professor, but he was specialized in signal processing, and he was specialized in neural nets. Okay, he was so good at neural nets, and then he brought his neural net models to the shootouts, and then it worked fairly well. Okay, and then if we go back to the EU night competition in 2001, so the leader of the winning team was a professor from Taiwan, and that professor was also a co-author of MATLAB toolbox for support vector machine, and that professor used support vector machine to build models for their load forecasting competition, right? And then some of these, like I think so if you look at this picture, this was 2012 competition. If I recall correctly, this guy, was a PhD student in Cambridge. So he was a machine learning guy, and then he built some machine learning models. And I recall he ranked, I think, maybe number 2 or number 3 in the load forecasting track of that 2012 competition. Right. So also say in the most recent competition, so this year or 2017 competition, The winner of this competition was from Japan. So it was from it was a weather company in Japan, and the winners were meteorologists. So again, they had nothing to do with the power systems, but they were meteorologists. And because they had so deep understanding of the weather data we provided, and then they were able to win that competition with their knowledge in meteorological science. Okay, so if we bring in these people to the fields, give them data, let them work on it, and we will, we'll get a lot of advance in the area we're working on, right? And I want to name a few useful discoveries. So other than the fact that early on in the previous page, I was talking about, okay, these experts in their field, they contribute, say, energy forecasting domain. There are a few new findings. I'll just, for the interest of time, I'll just name a few. So one of the findings was that using multiple weather stations for load forecasting. Okay, so before those competitions, power companies were using maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weather stations. But after the competition, we find that using multiple weather stations help improve load forecast results. Okay, load forecast accuracy. Another finding was that historical weather data may not be trustworthy. So this was very interesting because in the first 2 competitions, we provide competition data, we provide weather data to the contestants. And actually, weather data was provided by a weather service provider. It's a commercial grade weather data. Means it goes through quality control. Companies are buying those data because I have contacts from the company, so they gave the data to me for free as a sponsor to the competition. So the data was of very high quality, but it turned out that in the 3rd competition, 2017 competition, those meteorologists in Japan, they said, oh, this data was not good enough for our business, for the purpose of load forecasting. So they actually get rid of some data. They pretty much just, I think we provide 20 some stations, and they get rid of some of them because of the data quality issues. And it turned out that helped them won the competition. So when we say historical weather data may not be trustworthy, that means sometimes there are malfunctions in weather stations, and these weather service providers, they may fix the weather data in a certain way, but that fix is not good enough to achieve very high accurate, say, load forecast. Okay, so and later on, we so my research group invented some very clever way of fixing weather data that help further improve the load forecast accuracy. Okay. And then there are also, I'll say maybe negative things from the competition, but we see those as opportunities. So for example, I recall in 2014, we had 4 tracks: price forecasting, wind forecasting, solar forecasting, and load forecasting. And there was a winning method, I think invented by a professor from Carnegie Mellon University, who's an expert in machine learning. That method works for price and wind and solar. I think I ranked number 2 or number 3 on all 3 tracks. But it didn't work well for load forecasting. It was barely just beating the benchmark. So that basically said, oh, there are things that we can do, maybe we can try to see if there are really general framework can work for all, okay? Again, it will be hard, okay? Back to the earlier theorem or the findings. So there's no one method work for all, dominant the others. So it may be hard to find one, but that's always the wish. We try to find an automatic method to to work in as many situations as possible. Okay. The other one was performance in open data track was no better than closed data track. So open data track means we provide some data, and meanwhile, you can find any other data you want to support your models. So in addition to the ones we provided, you can use other data sources. And then closed data track means you can only use the data we provide. And then we find that in 2017, we had this open and closed data track. It turned out that the open data track's performance were no better than closed data track. Okay, so that means when we talk about a big data concept, so people are not really utilizing the big data, or maybe not using them in a sufficient or effective way. So that's the area of opportunities we can address, right? So we can try to see, because if there are more data, we're supposed to get better results. But the performance for that computation in the open data track was not better than the closed data track. Okay. And then another one was hierarchical information. So in both 2012 and 2017, we provided hierarchical information. So we try to see if people can use hierarchical information for load forecasting, but the hierarchical information was not well taken advantage of. So that means with or without hierarchical information, they gave pretty much similar forecast. So that's also, in general, in the forecasting field, there's a subfield called hierarchical forecasting, and there are a lot of research going on over there. Apparently, we didn't capitalize them in the energy forecasting domain yet. So at least not from the outcomes of the last global energy forecasting competition. Okay, so those are some discoveries. And I just want to show you a picture, because when we talk about weather stations, as I said, in the early days, 10 years ago, people were using just 1 or 2 stations. But these power companies didn't realize there are so many other stations around their territory that they can use. And when they use those territories, when they use those stations, that can improve their forecast. So this is to show you a project I did for a Florida utility, and we're trying to select weather stations for their territories and to improve their forecast. Okay. And before I conclude, so I just want to give some tips or sanity checks. So there are thousands of academic papers out there. Many of them provide very amazing results, but very often it's just too good to be true. So I'm providing a checklist. If you're interested in reading those papers, going through the list, it can give you some idea about credibility of the paper, and then you can decide if you want to read them or not. Okay, so a lot of them was, let's say, if the data was using proprietary data, the paper using proprietary data, and it's not using any new variables, and it's not taking advantage of other domains and things, or it's just catching all these buzzwords and putting all these acronyms together, NA, neural nets, ANN, part of deep learning, putting all these words together, most likely those are bad papers. So you don't want to spend too much time on those. But here's the checklist for you guys. I will provide the slides to the organizers, so you can have the slides later on. Okay. And these are some further readings. See, this first paper was from the Nobel laureates, and this one was from the NCEMC, the other high performers of the Puget Sound shootout. And this one, the third paper, was from the EUNI competition winners. And then this one was from the 2014 Global Energy Forecasting Competition. And we wrote, every year we have a special issue dedicated to, not every year, every time we had this competition, we organize a special issue. So you can look into those special issues as well. So these are some representative readings for the topic. So I think I'm about 10 minutes left. So welcome any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was great. We've got a few questions in chat. I might ask one quickly myself. You were talking about sort of the competitions as a way to help sort of reproducibility. Mm-hmm. Now people seem to be sort of releasing code a bit more with the papers they publish. Could you maybe speak a little bit about that and how you think that's changing, reproducibility within academic research? Okay, that's a great question. So if you see in the earlier days, no data, no models, no code, no nothing, right? So and then through these competitions, and we are seeing data floating out there, and then people can use. And also when people publish papers, they may decide, they may want to publish their own data, so just to improve the reproducibility of the work. And actually, that's that help improve the impact of the work as well. Okay, and then if they can release the code, that's even better, right? If they release the code, and then other people can pretty much just directly pull the code, pull the data, and then click a few buttons and then reproduce the work. Okay, I rarely release the code. Okay, so I've had maybe 50 papers or more. Maybe for less than a handful of them, I released the code.
even if I release code, I do not release the full version of code. Okay, this is why. Because my work is very, very valuable in the sense that there's commercial value behind it. And my sponsors, the people who did research with me, they wouldn't want me to just give away the code because they paid money for it, right? So, and people get a code. If I had released the code, it's like $1 million assets. So I don't want to give that away, all right? So, and the company sponsors don't want to give it away as well. And I see that when we organize these competitions, there are similar issues. So some of these top teams, they don't want to dive too much detail into the methodologies because of the commercial value of it. So we have, this is sort of a trade-off. Then we demand them, you ought to give sufficient detail for people to understand your algorithm, your method. I mean, if they want to implement it, they can do it on their own, but it will take like years. That's your advantage, right? So you have a few years ahead, before someone else can reproduce it, totally. So that's my take. So see, for me, my work, I know the practical value of it. I don't want to publish my code, but if others publish code, that's great. help with reproducibility. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Saeed, which says, how can I access the most accurate hourly climate data history in solar radiation for energy building simulation? So I guess maybe also a more general question to this is sort of, how can we get, clearly these models depend so heavily on meteorology. What sort of data can we get to help assist that?
Oh, that's a great question. So, well, good news and a bad news. So I'll start with the bad one first. Okay. No matter what data you get, at least from our experience, and we work with the cutting edge vendors in this field, like the top vendors that provides and sells weather data. Like say if you buy them, it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I work with those companies. Even those data worth that much money, those data still have many issues. So let's say, for example, for the work I do, load forecasting at the highest accurate load forecasting models to generate the highest possible accurate load forecast, I cannot use those data directly. I have to process those data. Okay. So when you say accurate hourly climate data history, how accurate you want. But I can tell you for decent accuracy. So just for like, if you want to be, say, most papers in the academic literature, you can say, just for example, go to Weather Underground. Okay, that's a site gave you a lot of weather history. You can script them and then get the data. That'll be fine. If you go to, say, in the US, we have NOAA. If you go to NOAA, the raw data is very bad, so you just can't use them, right? And you may get, I think you can pay to get quality control data, but quality control data is still very bad. You can go to some weather service provider to buy their data, and those data are of much higher quality, but you got to pay for it. Okay, so you either write code to script some of these websites, or you pay some money to get those commercial weather data. But again, to get the if you want to get a state of art state of art, say I'm just speaking for load forecast, state of art load forecasting models, state of art load forecast. Those data were not enough. So you have to do more work to get there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Robbie asks about macro energy systems analysis casting out to, say, 2050 can't obviously be observed. So in that context, can competitions play a role? I think it's quite an interesting point because obviously we're looking quite far ahead with a lot of these net zero systems.
Yeah, actually, I was going to organize a global energy forecasting competition in 2021. So I was going to kick off a competition last year, but because of data issues and things, we had to postpone it. For that competition, there was a long-term forecasting component in it, actually long-term solar forecasting. But it was not like a decade-long solar forecasting. It was like a year-long. So I don't know. I personally don't know how to execute a competition for a 2050 forecast, because we had to live that long to see it. But I think there are values. So maybe people can do that competition, and then 30 years later, let's go back and see how it worked. Because there are some studies, like especially in the some people's psychologies, right? So they track the successfulness of people, track their life. There were studies like that, but I don't, I wish we had one like that, and then we can wait for 30 years and see how it goes. But I don't really know how to execute it.
Yeah, that would be great if we would have thought of this 30 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Probably the last two questions, I think. But David asks about, where do you see the opportunities going forward? Can forecast models get much better than they are now, or is it really about adapting them to changing market dynamics? I think that's a really important question, because obviously, are we reaching sort of diminishing returns, and how much value that brings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love this audience. Thank you. Great questions. So two things. So first of all, how accurate is accurate enough? So that's like the first part of the question, right? So my take is my take is you should always try to get more accurate forecast, always, because that accuracy gain you the comparative advantage in the market. Let's say if you're in a competitive market, so you can always gain something if you're competing with others. Okay, of course you can say, oh, maybe for planning purposes within 1% or within certain percentage is fine. Fine, yeah. For some business need is okay, but if for some competitive needs, if you're a tiny bit more accurate than others, then you can capitalize those accuracy. Okay, and the other one is very important. So how do we use those forecasts? So maybe you get a forecast that's not so accurate, but then you can put things around it, make the decision-making process more receptive to those forecasts. Make the forecast more robust. So my forecast is not most accurate, but it's the most robust. So that's another thing. Accurate, that's a research topic my research group have been working on in the last 5 years. So make the forecast more robust. Or if the data was bad, I can still generate fairly accurate forecast. Right, so those are the things we can consider. So on the user side, it's very important for the users to understand forecast, to use the forecast well, because you may have a forecast that's just really bad, but really good, but user don't know how to use it. That's sad, right?
Great. So this will be the last question, I think. So it's Daniel is asking about the recent review on the state of the art in price forecasting. I guess that might be the Lago paper with the EPF toolbox with an open code benchmark to provide authors with a state of the art to compare to. So what would you say is or are the state of the art models in load forecasting? I.e., is there a better clarity today surrounding benchmark models for load forecasting than there was in 2010 to 17?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't know who wrote that review, price forecasting review. I'm not sure. Maybe Rafael or from his group. Oh, there was a link. Let me see. Oh, see, Rafael. Yeah.
I think it's probably Rafael Webon.
Yeah. Yeah. But for load forecasting, I know the state of art. I know I have the state of art because my work was compared with the best in the market, because my clients use my forecast and then they constantly get other companies talking to them and trying to sell forecast to them. So I know my work is state of art, but a lot of my work were not published. So even today I can still publish like the findings from 5 years ago. If I package something and send a paper that's new. So I mean, for load forecasting, you can track my work. So track my recent publications. Those I consider state of art in the literature, right? Because I still have many work not being published yet. But in terms of comparison, so my recommendation is you can always go back to those benchmark models, say for example from 2010 to 2017, and see how much better you get than those models, right? So it's not like I compare with the state of art, because some of these state of art, it requires a lot of work for you to reproduce. It's not reproducible. It is reproducible, but it will take you like 2 years to reproduce. Okay, because I advise startup companies as well. So when they try to implement my models, it takes them like several months. A team of people, several months to implement it. It's not easy. So for you to reproduce a quote unquote state of art, the real state of art, it takes you a lot of time. But then you can say, okay, state of art be the benchmark, be the like a easily reproduced benchmark by say 30%. But I can beat that benchmark by 35%. Then that means you are outperforming state of art. You can look at it in that way. So that will actually a shortcut for you to make comparisons. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So I think we're sort of out of time now. I guess if anyone's got any further questions, you're happy to take an email from anyone here. We'll share the slides again as well, obviously. This video recording will be on our YouTube page. So I want to say a big thank you first to Tao Hong for a brilliant talk, really interesting. And also, of course, I guess if there's a future global energy forecasting competition, we'll share within our network as well. So that'd be brilliant if we could take part. So yeah, thank you very much, and I guess it'd be it'd be great to talk in the future.
All right, thank you, Stephen, for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Great audience. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.